Let's get started. We're looking at John chapter 12, verses 42 and 43, and I have one question for you. Is it okay to be a secret Christian or a very understated Christian, so understated that nobody knows that you are a Christian? We're going to talk about that today. I was raised in a wonderful Christian home, and it was a great, great blessing. I had loving parents who stayed together their whole marriage. It wasn't a perfect family, it was a great family. And we had a lot of fun together. And we prayed before every meal. Now, how many of you prayed the prayer, "Come, Lord Jesus, be our guest, and let these gifts to us be blessed"? Or was it just us? Some of you did? There's a few people back there that did that. We also had that scary prayer at night. If I should die before I wake, no wonder we thought there were snakes under the bed, just saw something moving. We would pray that, and before I went to school, I never ate without praying. We didn't go out for meals very much. And so, for me, eating and praying kind of went together. And then I went to Sunnyside School in Kellogg, Idaho, and there was school lunch. And I looked around, and there were all these people eating without praying. And I thought, maybe they don't know, "Come, Lord Jesus, be our guest." So I asked my mom, I said, "What should we do?" And she said, "Just pray silently." Now, I know she was trying to help me out as a first grader, how to deal with this kind of stuff. But that was my first introduction to being a secret Christian. And I think it's encouraged by our culture. If you want to be a Christian, that's fine. But don't tell anyone about it. Keep it private. Don't share your faith, and don't express your faith in public. I love this Norman Rockwell picture here of these people watching this, I think, grandmother and grandchild praying in a restaurant. So let's look at our Bible passage for today. John 12, 42 through 43. Yet at the same time, many even among the leaders believed in him, in Jesus. But because of the Pharisees, they would not openly, here's the key, openly acknowledge their faith for fear that they would be put out of the synagogue. For they loved human praise more than praise from God. Now, this was going on a lot during Jesus' ministry. There were people in authority who believed in him, who saw the miracles. But because of their position and not wanting to lose that position at the top of the corporate ladder, the religious ladder, the political ladder, they didn't confess him publicly. Nicodemus was one of those people. Nicodemus came to Jesus in John chapter 3 at night, in secret. Now, we forget what night is like because we have lights everywhere. In fact, here living in Orange County, I think we only see about 5 stars at night because there's this all light stuff everywhere. If you go out to the desert, you see that there's more stars than black up there. It's just amazing to see the whole thing. But back in these days, when it was dark, and you could sneak around and nobody would know where you're going. When I'm driving around in downtown Huntington Beach at night, I have a 1971 Volkswagen bus. It doesn't turn the lights on automatically like many of your cars do. And very often I have people flashing and honking at me because I forget to what? Because it's so light everywhere. You don't even think about it because you can see everything and everything's all bright. Well, back then, people could sneak around in the darkness, and Nicodemus could go and visit Jesus, and nobody would know. And he came to him secretly because Nicodemus was one of the guys, with the big hats and the big robes and the whole thing. However, there's this troubling passage in the Bible. Matthew 10, verse 33. But everyone who denies me, Jesus says, everyone who denies me, here on earth, I will also deny before my Father in heaven. For how many of you does that make you nervous like it makes me nervous? Is being a secret Christian in a way passively denying Jesus in front of others, acting as if we don't believe in him, even though we do in our hearts. And I understand that it's hard to be a public Christian. You might think, well, it's easy for you, pastor, because you're a pastor. But let me tell you, when people ask me what I do, I'm often hesitant to tell them, because I know that there will be perhaps pushback, perhaps baggage, perhaps even an urge to cancel me right away and not listen to anything I have to say. You actually have it easier, those of you who aren't pastors, because you can just say, well, I suppose I could say I work in power and light. That would actually be true. But I'm tempted every time someone asks me what I do, to understate it. And sometimes I do, because I understand the pressure out there not to be a public Christian, but to be a private Christian. Has anyone not faced this pressure at all? We've all faced this out in the public sphere. There's 4 levels here. There's denying Christ publicly, just saying, I don't believe in Jesus, I'm not a Christian. There's being a stealth or a private Christian, secret Christian, like Nicodemus, or like the people in John 12, 42 through 43, who thinks it's better to be a stealth Christian than to be a denier of Christ. I hope so, because I've at times been stealthy about my faith. So it's better to be a stealth Christian than to deny Christ. Then the next step is being a public Christian. Who thinks being a public Christian is better than being a stealth Christian? Okay. But then you go over the edge with being an obnoxious hypocrite Christian. And we run into those people. There used to be a street preacher on Main Street here. He's not there anymore. Perhaps he's gone on to be with the Lord, and he's kind of obnoxious. And I walked by him once, and I said, hey, brother, how you doing? He says, are you saved? I said, yes, I love the Lord, and proud to say so. And he said, you don't look saved. That's what we call an obnoxious, hypocritical Christian. That's right, exactly. And I was told this last week that Billy Graham is really leading people to hell too, even though he's dead. But still, there is that line between public Christian and obnoxious Christian. And the best way never to be an obnoxious Christian is just never say anything at all, because then you never cross the line, right? Who thinks this is a balancing act? To be a public Christian and yet not cross the line into being obnoxious. We want to be attractive Christian. We want to be attractive believers. We want to be winsome. We want people to want what we have. We want to be an example that people would like to follow. Because truth is, if they're following some other ideology, they're not living life to the full like they could be. So, denying Christ, stealth Christian, public Christian, obnoxious hypocrite. And a lot of us float around between these from time to time. And the key is to land in the sweet spot of being an attractive public Christian. And that takes cultivation. There's one phrase which is very true, but it's easy to misuse. And this is used by Christians to excuse themselves from ever talking about their faith. Now, this is a really great phrase. Francis of Assisi. Let's read it out loud. 1, 2, 3. Preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words. Now, this is a good phrase. But how could it be misused? By having it be a get-out-of-jail-free card, never having to what? Say anything about your faith. If you just live by your example and never speak about your faith, then how is anyone else ever going to come to faith? If nobody had told me about the gospel, I would have never come to faith. Neither would you. Somebody actually spoke it at one time or another. Otherwise, you would not be a believer. It wasn't just examples that got you here. So yes, I agree that actions speak louder than words. But that doesn't mean don't use your words. We also have to share the gospel. The gospel is good news, and news is not shared by our example. In fact, 1 Peter 3:15 says this, and let's read it out loud together. 1, 2, 3. But in your hearts, revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect. Gentleness and respect, to be an attractive Christian rather than an obnoxious Christian. But to answer, we have to use words. We have to say something. We have to actually speak. Nicky Gumbel, who wrote the AlphaCourse, has this wonderful example about Uncle Norman. And it's like everybody has some Uncle Norman who was a Christian, but never told anybody. He just was such a great example. He kept it to himself and didn't bother people with religion. Nicky asks then, well, who told Uncle Norman about Jesus? Someone has to say something. We have to actually be able to share our faith too. And if you go back to this verse, always be what? Prepared. And the best way you could be prepared is to share what your faith means to you. I want to relieve you of something. A lot of people say to me, I hear a lot of things as a pastor. My number one question is, do dogs go to heaven? That's the number one. And I always answer, I hope so, but the Bible doesn't say much, but that's the one I get often. Another question I often get, not a question, a statement. I'd share my faith, but I don't know enough. I don't know the right Bible verses. I don't know enough about theology. I never went to seminary. Well, most of the people here didn't. John Ellis back there went to Bible college. I went to seminary. I'm trying to keep Tamara out of seminary so she keeps her faith. But you don't have to know anything more than this. What your faith has done for you. That's the most effective thing to share with anybody. How your faith got you through the hardest things in your life. How your faith gives you a sense of purpose in your life. How your faith lowers your fear level when life gets anxious. Nobody can argue with your testimony, especially if it's attractively shared. That's what it means always to be ready, prepared to give an answer. Anyone asks you to give you a reason for the hope that you have. In other words, you're showing and exhibiting hope in hopeless situations, and they're saying, what's going on with you? Well, here it is. And this has to do with Jesus, and that's the best thing you can possibly share. So, I want you to prepare your hearts for communion. We'll be receiving communion up here very soon. And in doing so, when you come forward, I want you to ask the Lord, when you've come forward for communion, how he can lead you to be a more attractive and more open Christian and more public. And that he would give you today or tomorrow an opportunity to do that. That he would line up these divine appointments for you. That he would help you to share your faith with others. So here's some practicalities. How to let your light shine. Number one, practice sharing your faith with believers. Why? Because they're going to like what you have to say. Share your faith with other believers. Share your own testimony with other believers. How many of you have been to our Wednesday with Friends gathering? Okay, if you didn't raise your hand, I want you to start coming. Why? Because it's mostly discussion, it's mostly interaction. And we get a chance to share on the Bible topic that's taught on what this means for us. And what does that do? It gives you practice in sharing your faith with other believers, because then you get more confident, and maybe someday you can share it with unbelievers. Now, please hear me. I'm not here to shame anybody for being an understated Christian. I just want us all, including myself, to move in the direction of being a more winsome, more attractive public Christian. I think we can all take steps in that direction. It's not going to happen overnight. But to practice with other believers is a real key. There's lots of ways to do that, but one of the best ways, and Linda would agree with this, is on Wednesday nights, where at tables we discuss things, and I feel on Wednesday nights our faith growing as we do this. So if you don't do it on Wednesday nights, find another place where you can do it. Our men's group online, some other group that you might be a part of. Share your faith with other believers. That's number one. Number two, don't let anyone tell you that the United States of America forbids you sharing your faith. The First Amendment says, first of all, that the government will make no established religion. In other words, that there won't be a state church. There's no Church of America like there's a Church of England. But it also says that there will be free exercise thereof. Nobody can prohibit you from exercising your faith in any setting. That includes schools, that includes the marketplace, that includes your neighborhood. There are people who want to interpret the First Amendment in such a way to say that you cannot be Christian in public. You have to be Christian in private. And that's not what the Constitution says. The free exercise thereof. The founding fathers wanted to guarantee that we could always share our faith in public. And it's right there in the First Amendment. It goes along with free speech. And if someone tells you that you can't do that, my question to you is, are you willing to pay the price for saying, no, I'm not going to follow that? Because you might have to pay a price for that. You might have to lose a job. You might have to lose a friendship. You might have to look bad in front of people. But the founding fathers did not create a secular society, a God-free society. They agreed on, this is very important, a generic, monotheistic, Judeo-Christian society. That's what they agreed on. And every president since then has said, God bless America, it's on your money. They didn't turn the government into a Sunday school, but there is an assumption of monotheism in our culture. And you have to have a higher power to run a country. You don't have to agree on what that higher power is to run a country, but you have to have one. What did Jefferson say in the Declaration of Independence? We're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. And they told him to scratch it out. He said, no. They scratched it out like 2-3 times. He kept putting it back in. He says, if we don't ground our rights in a higher power, and if we imply that our rights are given to us by the people can take them away. We have to anchor deeper than that. And our whole society basically assumes that. And it's actually more inclusive than secularism. It includes more people. So don't let people tell you what you can and can't do. Number 3, expect trolls. There's something called Nextdoor. Who knows about Nextdoor? I love to publicize what we're doing here at Spirit Station. And if I publicize it on Facebook, that's not a problem. If I put it on Nextdoor, the trolls show up. Keep that stuff off of here. And I'll say, so you're discriminating against Christians. That's not what I mean. They're nasty. and they'll complain about you. And all kinds of things will happen, not just with Nextdoor, but in a lot of other places. So you need to expect trolls. And in a friendly way, we need to be really firm with trolls. I have as much right to share a trunk or treat thing on Nextdoor as anyone has a right to share any event on Nextdoor. This is a public forum, and you can do that. But I've been taken down off of Nextdoor, and I'm not being an obnoxious Christian. I'm inviting people to like community disaster preparedness stuff. It's at a church. So expect to run into some trolls. That's just part of what happens. Avoid virtue signaling. This happens mostly in posts. It's what I call, I'm a Christian, so there then posts. Virtue signaling is trying to show to other people that you're really something. And who thinks you can cross the line into obnoxious Christianity by what you post? Post things in an attractive way. In such a way that people might want to become Christians. In a friendly way, in a loving way. If we do things without love, the Bible says it's like a clanging gong. And I don't want to be a clanging gong Christian. But on the other hand, I don't want to be a silent Christian. So we have to find the balance between being a silent Christian and a clanging gong. And our temptation is just to be silent, because then we don't have to work on that balance. So think about when you post Christian stuff that it's not in your face, that it's friendly, that it's winsome, that it actually attracts people. Use secret language. The word blessed is a secret code word for Christians, by the way. Oh, I feel really blessed. The other one is grateful. I'm feeling really grateful. I'm feeling really blessed. Poor Sebastian in the back works for a government agency, and he put God bless at the end of one of his emails and was called into the office. But God bless is another one. When someone sneezes, Gesundheit, nobody knows what that means. It's like Farvergnügen. It doesn't. It's a chance to say, God bless you. Blessings to all of you. There's lots of little ways you can share things with what I call code words, which are completely non-offensive. And also you can find out other Christians by kind of, if you throw out the word blessed, the other person kind of winks at you, then you know you're both in the same group there. So use words that are helpful. Use words that are less offensive. I never say how lucky, I always say how blessed. Now, there's no sin in saying you're lucky. There are some people come down on people when they say lucky, but just use words that imply faith. Number 6, show up for practice. I'm preaching to the choir. You guys are the ones who show up. For all of you out there on TV land, show up if you can. Here's why. It's fall, autumn. And I start having football dreams in the fall every year. I played football, small college football, Pacific Lutheran University, and I loved it. And in the fall, I start getting football dreams. And it's always the same thing. I'm 63 years old, 64 years old. I show up at practice, and Coach Frosty Westering says, "Where have you been?" It's been 40 years. I said, well, I got kind of busy, and but this is the same dream. It's recurring. And I try to show up, and I try to do practice, and I try to be a part of things, but everybody's younger, faster, and stronger than me, and it's very frustrating. But there's something inside of me that says, you got to show up for practice. And church is not the main event. This is practice for the real game, which is out there on the street. One of the reasons people often leave churches, they'll say, yeah, I left that church. I just wasn't being fed. John Wimber once answered someone, because someone came to him and says, you preach too simply. I need more, I need more meat. And he looked at him and he said, the meat is in the street. Your ministry out there is where the meat is. This is practice. This is the huddle. This is not the game. This is the huddle. The huddle's fun, but where your faith gets worked out is out in the public, in your families, in your workplaces, at your schools, the places you go. That's where the meat is. That's where we need to go and exercise our faith. But in order to do that, we got to show up for practice. Well, I'm a Christian, I just don't show up for practice. How long would the coach let you stay on the team if that was the case? We need to gather regularly. And if we make the example to our family, friends, and neighbors and work colleagues that every other event is more important than church, what are we expressing by our actions? When I grew up in the 1960s, church was the most important thing. And you didn't skip church for other things, you skipped other things for church. And now it's like, well, it used to be like school. You went every Sunday unless you were sick. Is anybody old enough here to remember perfect attendance Sunday school pins? Wonderful. I had perfect attendance Sunday school pins, and a lot of us did. Who has seen a church in the last 20 years with perfect attendance for Sunday school for kids? It doesn't happen anymore. Why? Because everything else is more important, and you got nothing else to do, then you go to church. So church used to be like school in terms of attendance. Now it's like a health club. I wish I went more often. I like going, but if there's anything else, I'm not going to the gym. If we want to be public Christians, we have to show up for practice on a regular basis, if nothing else, as an example to other people that it really is a priority. Number 7, ask him how to shine. Ask the Lord how to shine every day. I don't know about you, but I'm not very creative. In fact, I basically preach book reports on the same book every Sunday, the Bible. I don't have an original idea. I got this great book to work with, great material. Trust me, I'm not a creative person. And if God said, you got to come up with ways to share your faith, I would freeze. But if I ask the Lord to show me ways to let my light shine, who thinks he's going to show me the next couple of days? He'll give us opportunities where people are open to receiving what we have to say. Alan in the back has a wonderful prayer which he shared with us. For a time, I'm not sure if he still does, but for a time he would pray the prayer, Lord, send me one today. Send me one receptive person. Send me one person that will want to hear what I have to say. Who thinks that's a whole lot better than coming up with it by yourself? Yeah, it's just a whole lot better. And when you come to the communion rail today, ask the Lord how he wants you to shine in the next couple of days and have him give you opportunities to be a public Christian, to be an attractive public Christian. That's not really number 5, it's number 8, the last one. Wendy and I were coming home from Temecula. We had lunch with some friends, had some fun on Friday, and we were coming home. And if you come home on the 91 at sunset, you're looking right into the sun. But the truth is, the sunset was really, really beautiful, almost distracting for drivers. Wendy got a great picture of it. But the more you face the Lord and bask in his glory, the more you will reflect that to others. What you were doing in worship today was beautiful. As Adonna was up here singing an ancient hymn of the church and some new songs too, we were all basking in that light of the Lord. And John is the gospel of love and light. The more you worship, not just here in church, but the more you seek the Lord's face, the more he shines on you, the more you reflect to others. What's the definition of a full moon? It's when the moon is fully reflecting the light of the sun to the earth. And we want to be like a full moon. We want to be reflecting fully his glory. We want people to catch the light that we're getting from the Lord. And the more time we spend with the Lord in the Word and in prayer and gathered here in worship, and I know you love doing it because I felt it up here right before I started speaking. It's like you were all solar arrays facing the light of the Lord. And I got to sit up here and experience that. Stand up here, experience that. The more we face that sunshine, the more we'll be able to shine that light on others. We're not the sun, we're like the moon. But we can reflect as much as possible. Who thinks people would rather see the Lord than us? And the more we reflect, the more they see the Lord and the less they see of us. And they'll sense his presence. That's why we spend so much time in worship at the beginning of the service. We really have to sing all those songs? Yes, because we need to get aligned. My wife and I have a little 13-foot 1965 trailer. And I have 5 solar panels. And I hooked up this whole solar system, diesel power, diesel heater system. I love gizmos and gadgets and working on things. It's so much fun. And some people put their solar panels permanently on the top of their trailers. And that's really dumb because it's often not facing where the sun's going to be. But I can place those solar panels out around the trailer exactly where the sun's going to be for the rest of the day. Who think I capture a lot more power that way? We capture power by engaging the Lord directly, looking at his face. I'm going to invite the worship team up here. So those are the handful of practicalities. Practice with believers. Wednesday nights, other places. Don't let someone tell you can't exercise your faith in this country because it's guaranteed in the First Amendment. Expect trolls. Avoid virtue signaling, which can be unattractive. Use language which expresses your faith, like being blessed or grateful. Show up for practice. Ask him how to shine. Face. Did you change that to 8? That's impressive, Andrew. That's very impressive. If you ever want to look up anything, ask Andrew. He knows everything. I'm going to close with this. Let's read this out loud. 1, 2, 3. If you were arrested for being a Christian, would they have enough evidence to convict you? Let's pray.